prefab. And the cool thing about Noodle is it's not like you publish a plugin on the marketplace like with Bubble and then it's just done and you have to republish a copy if you want to, do it yourself. It's more like you take the prefab and it's just a collection of nodes and code. So you can edit it, you can share a version 2 or a version 3, and it's everybody can have their own version. It's so much more open source.
Yeah. I am missing, but that's another thing, the ability to kind of have linked includes in my project. I mean, if I go to a project and say, let's say, okay, I have this prefab, or I have a project, and then I import something from another project, where I make kind of like a utility project where I keep stuff like the drag and drop thing, and then I import it. And then if I want to go and make an update to kind of the original one and make all the users update, I have to update it again. That could be a little bit more slick, but never mind. So hopefully now you're seeing another screen as well.
Yes, I'm seeing on strategy roadmap, and I'm seeing the Noodle editor next to it.
So just to kind of show you what I'm building a little bit here. So what we're building is really a road mapping tool.
Nice.
And what I wanted to do then was kind of the basic Kanban kind of a management, where I can grab a feature and move it to another stage in the app. And back and forth again, of course, and then we have this similar thing in a couple of different views. But that's really the scope I wanted to address. I did not need to address sorting within the categories. And if I take something and drop it into a category, it's sorted in the category based on attributes anyway. So I don't have to keep a sort order. So I can't use drag and drop here to kind of move things around within the category. They will still be sorted in their own way. So I didn't bother about that. Which is, I mean, if you want to build something like Trello or something like that, then you probably want to do that.
Yeah.
The other thing that I also had to take care of, and that's probably a standard, is the fact that I don't only want to be able to drag these features around. I want to be able to click on them and get the pop-up window as well. So I have to differentiate between clicking and dragging.
That's quite challenging, yeah.
It messed things up a little bit, yes, and you'll see that when we look at the implementation.
Okay.
So that's basically the scope I was going for. Move things between categories and differentiate between click and start to drag, basically. So what I did then, if we look into the Noodle editor instead, there's a bunch of components. In my D&D, there's a D&D context, which kind of just keeps a little bit of context for the session. I'm not actually sure I need this anymore, to be honest. It's an incremental thing, and this is not that much used anymore. There is a target, which is basically, okay, it's the group. If you look at the kind of the preview to your right, you can see that it's highlighted there. So all of the targets are groups, and then I just put the component children under that. You can put whatever you want to be a target. You'll see that when we look at how I use it later. And then there's some logic in here. We'll get back to this as well. And then there's, in the similar sense, there's a draggable component, which then also is a group. It uses the Noodle drag object, and then you put your children within that to make, okay, this is the stuff that I want to be draggable.
Okay.
And that's also one observation I did. The Noodle drag component doesn't really use native drag and drop drag.
Okay.
It's a different thing. So when I started this, I asked some questions, and then I think it was Erik Thorstensson or some Noodler said that, oh yeah, but I have this drop target little project that you can get, where you can grab a file from like the native file browser in the OS and bring it into your app and drop it on it, like upload a file or something.
Yeah.
And that uses, if you will, platform native drag and drop to the browser, but this isn't. So
okay.
that's kind of a little bit of a funky observation that those are two different mechanisms, really.
Yeah. Do you know what it is? It some like JavaScript library that they use for the drag and drop?
Probably.
Yeah.
But anyways, and I was that made me struggle a bit. But then okay, I don't need, at least not in the same context, to handle both internal drag and drop and being able to grab files from outside and drop in.
Luckily.
So that worked out.
Yeah.
Anyways, I thought we'd started looking how this looks when you use it.
Yeah.
So the first thing maybe then is to look at something that's draggable. So this is one of these feature blobs that you see highlighted. And then I just start by saying, okay, this is a draggable. And then I insert all kind of the real content in here.
Okay.
And then, of course, when I and then if you look at the other end of things, let's see here. We go to features. You can go at the. Okay, this is the kind of the categories. And then, okay, I just start with saying, okay, this is a D&D target, and then I put kind of the framing there inside of that.
Yeah, that's like the title at the top with the status and that stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
Exactly. But yeah, exactly. And then, of course, the objects show up inside that through this repeater. And here's kind of the rewrite of all of that stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, so how does it work then? Well, let's go back to the draggable thing. So basically, what I do is that I catch, of course, the drag event when the drag gets started. I trigger that to set the state to say, okay, I'm now dragging things, and then I record. I have this. Let's see, where is it? Where is that?
So, and essentially each group has its own object. Like you're sort of using the object ID to say, this is me, you know, I'm this object and I'm being dragged.
Exactly. And then as I drag, the Noodl drag object emits drag move events continuously. As soon as you hold down and start moving, you'll get a series of those events. And then basically what I do is I keep track of, okay, where are the pointer coordinates right now? And I put that in a context object, basically. I say, okay, just remember where you are at the times. So while I'm dragging this stuff, you can see that probably here. While I'm dragging this stuff, you can see that it is kind of updating wherever it is, right?
Nice.
So that goes on, and then when I drop it, then I get the drag end thing. I send an event, and then if you look at if we instead look at the target thing, the target thing then continuously looks at the same. Let's see. Okay, here's the context object. We have the current X and Y position. There's a status in that as well, saying that, okay, is there drag ongoing or not? And while there is, I'm kind of looking at, okay, are the X and Y coordinates right now within our box where we are? I get that from the group. And then, so I know if I am kind of being hovered over or not. And then when the drag ended event happens, you know, when I release it from the other one, I look then, okay, are we targeted? Okay, is it inbox for us? Yeah, okay, it is. Then I will say, okay, we've been dropped on, and emit that signal.
Nice. The inbox function must have quite a bit of maths in it that you had to take some decisions about. Is it like overlapping, or is it like it has to be contained within the box, or how
No,
did you?
it's not. I'm just going for if the actual pointer position is within the dropped box. So if you look at it over at the preview, say if I take it here, it's when the mouse pointer gets in the box. I don't
Okay.
care if the entire draggable object is inside. I'm just looking at the
Yeah.
cursor coordinates there.
Okay. So that actually, what was it? The group, was it emitting coordinates earlier? It was actually emitting the current cursor coordinates.
Exactly.
Okay, got it. That's clever. That's clever. So you're kind of mixing, it's dragging, and I know where the cursor is, therefore
Yeah,
it must be dragging at this position.
exactly.
Okay.
And then when I know,
Very good.
okay, and then even if, and then actually that's where the boxes, the kind of the target boxes react as
Mm,
soon as the moving cursor gets here. Okay, there it's in my my area, right?
yeah.
I haven't dropped it yet, so I haven't done anything, but it's there. And then if I move it along even more, oh, now I'm in that category instead, right?
Mm, mhm.
So
Nice.
basically, I'm continuously tracking the X and Y positions to understand if I am on top of any target object, or the target objects. The target objects can look at that themselves, because each target object looks at the current X, current Y, and try to figure out, are we in our in
Mm,
our box right now?
yeah, got it. Okay, great.
And then, okay, once you actually do drop something, um, then comes the next problem. So basically, what I did then was that I thought that, okay, uh, let's look at the let's look at yeah, let's see where did we get that. That's the one, because I also have another. No, actually, I'm doing that. Sorry, it's been a while since I looked at this. So in this, now we're back looking at a draggable object, in this case.
Mm,
So another thing there is that from this component, I get an object reference saying, okay, this is this specific draggable object,
mhm,
and then I have another global object to keep that really is outside of the drag and drop utility, but that I can link this to. So here I attach the kind of the attributes I want to know about the dragged object. In this case, it's a feature ID, because I want to know what feature I'm dragging around.
mm,
Uh, and that's really not in the kind of the inside context object. Just keeps track of the X and Y coordinates and whether I'm actively dragging or not. And then I have this kind of external object to keep in track of, okay, but what am I dragging? Because
yeah.
this would be different if I do another application and I want to drag something that's not the feature. I want to drag something else, right?
Mm,
Uh,
yeah.
so potentially I could add more attributes to this object to say, okay, this is I don't know, a customer record or whatever, and put lots of stuff in there.
Mm,
And
yeah.
then that's used in turn. If you go back to the actual target, which in our case then is, let's see if we can navigate the target a bit easily. Okay, so here we see the target, and then when the dropping happens, we get this dropped on signal from that component.
Mhm,
In my case, I just take that, okay, something happens. I have the object ID of my external object keeping track of kind of what's being dragged. In my case, it's a feature, so I just look up the feature and set some new parameters on it based on where it was dropped. But
mm,
obviously, this is kind of application specific on what's happening when you drop something on
yeah.
a target. So that's why I kept it outside of the drag and drop component.
Mhm. Makes sense.
And in this case, basically, when I drag it from one column to another, I just set the feature stage to column I'm in, and then it's reread and updated in the background.
Okay. One issue I had with this kind of thing when I was developing with Noodle was that the repeating groups, the repeaters, sometimes don't refresh their content straight away. So like you could change the record properties, but
Yeah.
it'll stay in its old group because the repeater hasn't updated its contents yet.
Yes, that can be a problem sometimes, and sometimes it delays a little bit. Not in this particular scenario, I don't have that problem. I had it in other parts of the app. I have had that problem, but then I'm doing a lot of caching as well. So I I read the records and then I get the local object instead.
Yeah.
And then I use data from that. And then when I know that I have updated the record, I just go and kind of explicitly refreshes it to make sure. But I agree with you. Sometimes there's a problem there that it doesn't automatically refreshes whenever you want it to do.
Yeah. If you move one of the tasks, I'm just wondering if the query records fires every time that you move a task or if it only fires once. No, okay. Oh yeah, okay, it does. So that it's that there's another thing that I did. I had one of the reasons I had that problem was because I would often hook up the query to a signal to say only run the query if something happens, and then it means that the query only runs when that signal is fired. It never runs spontaneously. Whereas I think because yours isn't hooked up, it's running spontaneously every time it detects a change in the data. Yeah,
and you can actually, I think, I don't know this, but I think if you look at parse, you can set this underlying when you do a parse query. You can kind of say, okay, just give me data, or you can set it up so it actually will give you a signal if it changes.
Yeah.
And I assume that the Noodl query records node is doing that. If you don't have any signals attached to trigger it, then it sets it to kind of automatic notify me back, which is great. That's also one of the things. I mean, I've had that in other parts of the application as well, where I explicitly want to trigger rereads, and then I typically also end up with doing things like going from like on mounted also get it, because I want to get it initially when it renders.
Yeah, I'm just thinking one possible kind of I'm not here to sort of give you advice about your own app, but just from having worked on other projects where we had things like this, and in deployment, one thing I discovered recently was that when you're working locally, the query records is actually querying a kind of the query records is querying the cloud database, so that's fine. But when you deploy and then you have, for example, somebody who maybe in their selected list they have like 50 items or 100 items for whatever reason they're really using it hardcore, then the fact that it's always doing a repeat query means that which is not a bad thing. It's it's no big deal that it's doing repeat queries. But if you have a lot of users doing a lot of queries where it's returning hundreds of items maybe several times because they're doing a lot of movements, you might want to then think about, okay, should I instead maybe do a query on page load for each different category, stick those queries into arrays, and then work with the arrays unless the user creates a new card. So like if they're just using their existing cards, I'll change arrays and I'll set record properties, but we won't call the database to give us the new records. We'll just move it around in the arrays instead. And then so it's all happening on the front end and I never have to do any more queries.
I was thinking, when I run into some issues with that refresh thing, I was thinking a bit along those lines. I ended up kind of halfway because I do a lot of caching, as I said, where when you do page load, I typically read in large or relevant parts of the database into kind of local variables in the front end instead. And then I use that for all the rendering comes from those.
Yeah.
But then I didn't want to go into kind of updating the local copies, because then you end up with at some point you need to push it back to the database again.
Yeah.
And if you're running multiple users at the same time, you also get kind of inconsistency issues there. So
very true. Very true. Yeah,
So
your query is going to mean that if someone's collaborating with you and they move
exactly,
on their side, then it's going to push that
then
record.
we really messed up. I pull up a feature, I do some editing, and it's not pushed back to the database. And then you go in and open the same thing and make another edit, and then I have all of these kind of issues to take care of that. So we really wanted to make sure that the tool was kind of multi-user, multi-threading safe in that sense. So
Yeah.
we decided to push everything to the database.
Yeah, which I think a lot of SaaSes are like SaaSes make their money from being like team apps, and so you're probably exactly right that, and this is one of the biggest things coming from Bubble. When I came to Bubble, I came with like colleagues from Bubble who also were trying to escape, and one of the first questions for any platform was, how do you handle live data updates?
Yeah.
So if I'm working on my side and I send a chat message, does the person on the other side see the new message from me, or do they have to refresh their page to do another query to see the message? And I guess here the answer is, if the query concerns that message and then that data is updated, then theoretically that should fire. But I don't know actually. Have you tested it on two browsers to see if the query fires from another? If your data is like a WebSocket, so it actually does fire when another person updates a list?
Nah, it doesn't really. But so for example, if I have two browsers open on different machines and I start dragging and dropping stuff or doing other changes, it won't push the change to the other guy's browser, but it will always. But since the database is updated, whenever he kind of like, let's say I move this one over here. He doesn't see that, so he think it's still in the ID stage. If I open it, I also have kind of like a stage in pre-study over here that will be updated. So even if he clicks on it, when he tries to interact with object, then it will fire. But you could end up in situations where, but I think that's kind of okay, because if you render something and you look at it. And then I do something, and okay, it's maybe ideally I would like stuff to start happening in the background.
One easy solution.
It's not really that important because it's not like a collaboration thing like Trello or something like that you want to do it, but.
If it became an issue and if you did want to have two people working on the same lists and there was sort of an issue, I think I get what you mean. I don't think there's a problem here, because I think that apart from the status change, if, like you said, if someone opens the pop-up and you've already changed the title, then they'll see it because it's calling the record when it opens the pop-up. So it's going to show the new title in there. So that's fine. I guess a solution I used in an app with a chat function was the MQTT module for Noodle, which is good. And I used it with Shifter, which was like $10 a month, but you can use it for free for testing. And it worked okay. So it was basically just a standard kind of MQTT thing, sending messages. So if you come into this group, then I'll sign you up to the group, whatever the organization name is. There'll be a group for that, like a message channel for that. And then if I move something, then I fire a message to that org channel and say, everybody in the org needs to get this message to say, refresh the list of
whatever it was,
whatever it was, whatever the status was, or everything, so that that's good, but it can be a little bit complicated to set up, but that's one way to get that to work.
I really think you could probably, that's one way of doing it. I think you could actually get parts to help you with it.
Oh yeah.
You might have to kind of do some backend code there to say, okay, I want to catch this WebSocket message from parse that something has changed, and then translate that into a re-render. And so you probably could do it all within the Noodle parse environment.
I'm actually, you keep talking about parse, and it's interesting because I'm pretty interested in. I'm not a coder, so I'm not excited about getting access to it because I want to play with it that much. But I think having the option of customizing the parse backend is pretty amazing. That you could maybe do some some WebSocket stuff, or that's going to be a pretty cool thing.
And again, that's kind of the beauty, because when you drop down to JavaScript, you can mix and match within the same environment. So
Yeah.
I mean, right now I'm working on some stuff where um, I upload basically versions of the roadmap to file store on the parts backend, and then I'm not using there's this file upload Noodle node
Yeah.
to do that. So I started using that, but then I thought, okay, I want to do things a little bit differently. So then I'm kind of interacting with it directly from JavaScript code calling parse there instead. So you can basically mix and match
Yeah.
to suit your needs. I think
That's very cool.
that's really cool. You're not kind of
Yeah.
locked into, okay, you started using this paradigm, now you have to stick with it. You kind of, I want to cheat, I want to break out here and do some fancy stuff that's not included in the Noodle wrapping of
Yeah.
parse.
Yeah. You can
So
really extend your app as far as you want, really, if you have your
yeah,
own self-hosted
yeah.
version of it.
I can honestly, I can see us building an app like we do now. Okay, we start using Noodle, and right now it's like 90% Noodle and 10% JavaScript, maybe. And then potentially, as you evolve it, if you have to,
Mm.
it can kind of shift, and then maybe 2 years down the line, it's 10% Noodle and 90% JavaScript, and I don't have
Yeah.
to do this big kind of crash boom bang rewrite in React with real programmers from scratch and spend a couple of hundred K euros just to
Mm.
redo the same thing.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's, we talked about it with this other big project that you're future proofing yourself because, like you said, you might need developers in the future, you might need DevOps, you might need, people who don't have a Noodle background to come and help you. And if you have the right documentation and a lot of stuff written in JavaScript, then theoretically anybody can come and
Yeah,
actually just quickly learn what Noodle's about and then help you with the JavaScript parts and the operations
yeah,
parts.
yeah.
Yeah, so it's very cool.
Yeah, and I think it's, I mean, looking at the way you would build an app like this if you're not using low code. Say, okay, but I want to use a UI framework. I'll go for Material or something like that, and it's a lot of tedious coding work to build visual stuff. That's a lot easier and more effective to build using visual means.
Yeah.
So I actually think that it would the combo of at least using Noodle or something like Noodle to kind of what you see is what you get, draw the stuff
Yeah.
you want, and then okay, at the end it's the same thing with Noodle. At the end of the day, that's translated down to React. But
Yeah.
so you could just write it in React, but how boring is that?
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah. Yeah.
even for the kind of professional full-time JavaScript coder, it's a much easier way to get stuff done.
Yeah. I was kind of embarrassed in some of my Learnbook videos because I was really showing like every hour that I was working on Learnbook, and I kept flipping back and forth between different parts of the app and, sort of really making like an ugly version of it just to see how it works on the screen.
Yeah.
And I kept saying, I was embarrassed. I'm like, somebody could be watching this who's a developer and thinking, what is he doing? I'm like, so I kept saying, I'm just like, it's like I'm doing a pencil sketch and I'm not ready to paint yet. I'm not ready to go over it in pen yet. I'm just sketching it out, and that's how I feel in my head. And I feel like that's kind of what you're talking about. It's like you have this visual way of like just seeing what it's going to be like and getting something on the screen, instead of just sitting and coding and wondering what it's going to be like in the end.
No.
So
I mean, were you around when the preview was automatic as well? The old preview thing.
I did. I really only used a little bit of Noodle last year, and I really started this year when, in March when the whole thing went.
They really should get that back, because that was. I can see why they took it away, because it didn't scale, but it was a really cool thing that you had like all the visual components were in that tab. So as soon as you started to create the visual component and drag and drop things, you could actually see what happened in real time without having to execute it. Without having that was a really neat feature for building graphical objects.
Yeah.
So I mean, I know that they're working on getting some incarnation of that back into the tool again. I think that would
Nice.
be great, because it was really, really useful.
Cool. I mean, in the end, maybe if they open source the editor, they can kind of make available older versions of it, and that could, help to.
I think that's probably a lot of work that won't.
Sure.
But
Yeah.
that also interesting. I I didn't watch your entire video the other day because we didn't have time about the self-hosting stuff you did.
Yeah, yeah,
Because that's on my list of things to do as well.
I bet. I
to
bet.
iterate through that.
Yeah.
And that's also one thing where maybe I don't know. Is it easy enough the way it is, or should someone, once this is open source, make kind of a complete Docker image with basically everything you need?
It's a really good point. What's something I thought about while going through it was at the moment it's set up to be a static web page, and it could be anywhere. The S3 bucket points a URL towards the index file, and that's it. So you could conceivably have that in. I don't even know if it needs to be in Docker, but something like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, certainly I know that the backend part definitely on App Runner they mention in the documentation something about it being a Docker image.
Yeah, it is.
So if that they will release that as, and they talked, I think Kotta mentioned that yesterday, that they're working on releasing the backend Docker image, and so that means that you could just theoretically
The
deploy
cool
that
thing is
wherever you want.
you could potentially do I mean, right now it's the backend who is the Docker image,
Yeah.
but that we use App Runner for. But you could actually do a Docker image with the backend and with a pre-set up MongoDB database.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And with a web server, unless you just want to use S3. So basically, you say, okay, here's this pre-configured Docker container. Use App Runner. Boom, there you are. The only thing you have to do is to copy your static app into the S3 bucket, and you're off to the races.
Yeah, that's what we were talking about that yesterday with Magnus as well, who's working with me on the self-hosted stuff. Saying that what I think what's going to come very soon is what I saw in other no-code or low-code projects in the past that were open source, where people very kindly set up a kind of what you're talking about, which is a one-click deploy.
Yeah.
So just say, okay, you've got your app, you've got the codes and everything. You just do this, fill in the data in this one-click deploy. We'll deploy it where it needs to go. You've chosen Amazon, okay, deploy it in Amazon. That's really, I think that'll be vitally important, because a lot of beginners and low coders who are just trying to play around, they want to self-host, but they don't want to learn how AWS works and start paying Amazon and stuff. So I think having a Docker deploy would be great.
And you don't want to manage this afterwards. I mean, I'm pretty confident that I can set it up. I'll screw up a few times and then I'll get it working the way I want. But then, if I have paying customers on it, I need to maintain it. I need to kind of make sure that it's actually, and then, okay, now I need to do this update, and then there's a new parse version, and I mean, all of that great stuff is, I'd rather do something else, right?
Yeah, well, DevOps is a job, and that's what, Bubble's argument back in the days was always go and find out how much it costs to really run a server and hire a DevOps. Because you're not going to be able to do it by yourself. And you'll see that Bubble's pricing is not so bad. And they're right in a way, but I think there are more and more tools coming out. Like in another project, I got shown a tool called New Relic. And New Relic is nice for just at least knowing if your website is up and it's responding correctly. And the database is responding and the backend is responding, and just to know that everything's responding. Like, it doesn't help you actually, like what you said, updating parse and stuff like that and doing maintenance. It doesn't help, but just knowing that your website's up, because that's the first thing, is like people start phoning you like, I can't get on the website. Oh, the Amazon app runner is down. Okay, I have to restart it. So it's something to really think about with self-hosting, but I do feel like it's worth the effort to learn.
Yeah,
because
if and when, knock on wood, knock on the forehead, that's flattened to others, we get to a situation where we get paying customers on the project, I think that I would probably, at least for a while, would want to go with a paid Noodl hosting as well.
Yeah. I mean, that's where Noodle want to go, is like convincing people, okay, if you want to do it by yourself, it's your funeral, but you could also just have us do it, and we're really good at it. So
I mean, they're not that expensive. It's not a hassle I don't have to think about, and it's also kind of okay. That's a way to make sure that they get paid at least something for all the great stuff they're doing. So,
talking about them being expensive, the other day I realized, because one of my biggest questions was, I got quoted a couple of things from Noodle at the beginning. I was like, say I have like 1,000 users on this SaaS, how much capacity do you think I would need? And they were like, oh, maybe 2 or 3 units. The big question has been, is that really, what is it really going to look like? What is one user going to look like in terms of capacity, in terms of server usage? And with this kind of complex app that I'm working on that we developed, that's had its first few demo users, we added, when we deployed it, we had 0 capacity units, and the cloud functions were quite sometimes timing out. They were quite slow. And when we added 1 capacity unit, suddenly everything started running perfectly smoothly, 400 millisecond response times, just perfect, like Google scores, everything's great, page load in 1.5 seconds, that sort of thing. And it really was just like a really nice sign, like, okay, with one concurrent user, at least we know that it's working well. Now we can go up and see, where does 1 capacity unit take us, but we know that the Noodle framework itself is fast. So it's now just a question of how many capacity units do we need per number of users, right? But that was a really, really nice thing to see the other day. So I'm starting to get finally a bit of reassurance that, like you said, you can pay Noodle to manage it for you, and it's not that expensive.
No. And then I think that's genius with this open source thing, because it's the same thing as with you have a get out of jail free card in terms of the JavaScript thing, but now you have the same thing with, okay, but if it doesn't work out with Noodle hosting, or God forbid if they will be going belly up or wherever, there is an escape path, right?
Yes, exactly. You'll always have one version of the editor that works. And the version today is pretty stable. 2.9.2 is quite stable. Maybe there's some things that could be better, but you could carry on with this at least until you transition into full code with a real agency, for example, and not a Noodle thing, but or just stick with Noodle for as long as you can hold out.
I think it's a gutsy move from them, but I think it's the right move. And I think long term they're actually going to profit from it, to say, okay, we're not trying to lock our users in. we believe that this is cool. We believe that and we understand that getting this assurance that it could continue without us is actually worth quite a lot. I mean, we're running on our own money. We're not seeking investment or anything like that for this project. But I could imagine someone getting VC and then knowing that, but it's all locked into this small little company in southern Sweden with like 15 employees, and if they go belly up, then what happens to this fantastic SaaS company that we're building? Like, it's impossible. You can't invest in that.
The example you gave was exactly the example that started coming out in March in the Bubble forum. So people saying, how dare Bubble do this to me, when, like, for example, I went for investment and I was up for $10 million, and they looked into the technology and were like, no, we don't like it. It's locked in, and we won't own what we're investing in. We're giving you money for something.
Which makes it impossible from a VC point of view. I mean, you can't do that.
But with Noodle, it's like, okay, we do actually own it. We have it self-hosted. Okay, it's using an editor that's this very special IDE. You can really call it an IDE. I try to call it an IDE. It's using a special IDE, but it's based on React. And if your coders get in there and you want to fully recode it, you can, because we've got the documentation, and we've got it well commented and whatever. So I agree 100%.
That's great.
I got to go for another meeting. Sorry, but
I don't know if you learned something.
I did. I think if you were to share maybe a kind of prefab-y version of at least the D&D bits, then I think with that video people could maybe recreate it in their own editor. Possibly.
So what I had but took away, silly me, was when I developed this. I did kind of like a small demo app where I just had a couple of categories and moved stuff between them and things like that. But since the use case was already very much tied to changing things in the database, that also had a separate database, and that database I took away because I needed to clean up my Noodle account.
Sure.
So I think what I really should do is to kind of clean it up a bit and then make one of those demo applications that doesn't necessarily run towards the backend, but through local storage instead, then kind of repackage it a bit. Then it could be something that could be more useful for people. Right now, I think it's a bit too involved in my app to be easily reused by someone else. Did you look at the stuff that Anders sent? I haven't had time to do that.
Yeah, I have. I think it might work similarly to what you've done, and so I'll look at that afterwards. I haven't had a chance to dig into it, but I've opened the editor and seen how it works, and I think it's very similar. He has drop areas that have like variable heights, and it detects, it calculates where's my height and width and where's the cursor. So I think it's very similar. So I'll look at that, and maybe that's something that I can reverse engineer, and maybe then with looking at your stuff as well, try to perfect it, and we can publish some sort of drag and drop prefab. Would be great. I think
or if his is close enough, I think we should nudge him to kind of
finish
it off and make it.
Yeah, it's hard to. Andrew's a very busy man, so yeah, you can try, but
whatever. My partner Jonas is he knows both him and Michael Carter personally, so a little bit of leverage there.
Take them for a beer and see if we can get them drunk enough. Okay, got it. That's how we deal with Swedish people.
We'll go out, have a beer with them, and say, "Oh, it would be really great if this was a native prefab, wouldn't it?" See what we can get for that.
We can try. It was a really stimulating conversation. Thank you so much, Per. It was
thank you. Nice talking to you, and keep up the good work. And we'll see each other at the Discord, right? And,
and we'll probably have more things like this in the future for sure.
I think we have other common interest is this access control thing for multi-tenant thing, which I'm also obviously doing.
We need to have a video on that. Anders really wants to do a Noodle sponsored video on that. He told me, and I hope that we go through with that. And Kotta is talking about maybe doing it with Michael Cartner next week, because it is something that like I can try to explain it, but I think it really takes the experts to explain that.
It's also, I mean, just like drag and drop, doing multi-tenancy is one of those. Everybody wants, or 95% of all the Noodle users want to do it. Right?
As soon as you want to build a SaaS, that's like obviously the first thing you want.
Definitely.
For sure. Okay.
Great.
Well, thanks again, Per. It's really nice.
Have a good day.
Nice meeting you too. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.